Good day to everybody. My name is Dr. Joe Webber. I am the CEO of STEMconnector. And when I did my PhD, I did a PhD in quantum physics, which is the study of things that are really very, very small. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Vemitra White, and she works with things that are really very, very large. I'd just like to welcome you, Dr. White.
Well, thank you for having me, Dr. Webber.
Now, Dr. White, I have a question for you. And when I was doing my PhD, as I said, I was studying things that were really, really small, subatomic particles. But one of the things I discovered quite quickly is that you can never trust an atom. Do you know why you can't trust an atom?
I don't know why you can't trust an atom. I would just say probably because they're very small particles, I would assume.
You're close, you're close. It's because they make up everything.
Wow! See, I learned something today too.
So a bit of fun there. Now, I was really excited recently to see, and I'm sure everybody watching this was as well, to see NASA landing a rover on the planet Mars. And we know that little rover traveled 290 million miles to get from here to touch down softly onto the Mars soil. Can you talk a bit about what's next for NASA? What is NASA working on now?
So one of our many big initiatives that NASA is working on right now is a return to the moon. So our plan is to send the first woman and the next man back to the moon. Can you say exciting? And we're trying to establish a sustained presence on the lunar surface with a future focus on establishing a human presence on the surface of the red planet, also known as Mars. And NASA has named this program Artemis. Have you guys heard of Artemis? Have you guys heard of Artemis? Very, very cool. Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo, for those of you who may be familiar with mythology.
Well, that's great. That's great. And I think it's a very exciting project. Now, you work for NASA. It says so on your shirt, and we know you work for NASA, which I think is a super exciting place to work. Can you talk to us a bit about what it's like to work at NASA? We all know there's astronauts, but what other kind of jobs can people do at NASA?
So I would just start with this. Working at NASA is a very, very nice, fun, exciting type of job. But for those people that are interested in learning more about NASA, I will most definitely encourage them to check out our website at www.nasa.gov. There's information there for parents, students, all students, P20, from kindergartner to graduate school. There's information there for both formal and informal educators, faculty members at community colleges and universities as well. And so as far as careers at NASA's, individuals can check out our usajobs.com website to look up those opportunities. But the different types of jobs that are at NASA, oh my gosh, we have tons of jobs. Typically, we look for STEM majors, but besides the STEM majors, there's other type of work that goes on at NASA. We have jobs such as IT specialists. We have jobs such as human resource specialists, of course, education specialists like myself. Students that go on to college, we would strongly encourage them to study hard in those STEM majors. But again, like I said, we do hire outside of those STEM majors, such as accountants, HR specialists, education specialists, just to name a few.
That's great. And I think, we've got a young audience here today. So I think they're away from making some of these career decisions. But, I remember when I was at their age, I wanted to be an astronaut. And it wasn't really on the cards at the time. So I went into the world of quantum physics instead. But don't do what I do. I think there's great opportunity now for the next generation really to study in STEM and go to work for NASA and be part of the next frontier in space, travel to space. So,
what are constellations? Constellations are a group of stars that look like a particular shape in the sky and has been given a name. These stars are far, far away from Earth. Some stars in a constellation might be close while others are very, very far away. But if you were to draw lines in the sky between the stars and use lots of imagination, the picture, it just may look like an object, an animal, or even a person, as you can see here in the picture to the right. So over time, cultures around the world have had different names and numbers of constellations, depending on what people thought they saw. So today, there are approximately 88 official recognized constellations. So later in the presentation, we're going to take a look at a few using Google Sky. Next, we're going to talk about how NASA used constellations. So, NASA's use of constellations. Star patterns are very helpful for navigating rockets and making sure the rocket is traveling in the right direction. Some rockets have star trackers, which are very similar to a camera. The star tracker takes pictures of star patterns and compares the pictures with its built-in star maps. This helps to ensure that the rocket is on the right path and is not flying upside down or sideways. Now that we have explored what constellations are and how NASA uses constellations, let's explore some of NASA's cool astronauts. And first, we're going to start with Dr. Ronald McNair.
Dr. Ronald McNair was a renowned physicist, astronaut, and the second African American to fly into space. Although he came from a low-income family, his parents always encouraged him to do well in school, and he excelled at math and science at an early age. In 1959, 9-year-old Ronald attempted to check out 2 books at the segregated Lake City, South Carolina Public Library. He was asked to leave.
Get out of here.
But refused to do so until he was allowed to check out his books. When the librarian threatened to call the police, he sat on the counter and waited patiently. After the police and his mother arrived, the officers recommended that the library give him the books, as he posed no obvious threat. In 2011, that segregated library became a museum celebrating his life and was renamed the Dr. Ronald E. McNair Life History Center. In 1967, Ronald graduated as valedictorian from Carter High School in Lake City. It was renamed Ronald E. McNair Junior High School in 1986. In 1971, he received his Bachelor of Science degree with highest honors in engineering physics from North Carolina A&T State University. In 1976, Ronald received his doctorate from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in quantum electronics and laser technology. He soon became nationally recognized for his work in laser physics and became a staff physicist with the Hughes Research Laboratories in California. Dr. McNair was an accomplished saxophone player and held a 6th degree black belt in karate. In 1978, Dr. Ronald McNair was chosen by NASA for the astronaut training program as one of 35 finalists from a pool of over 10,000 applicants. On his first space mission in 1984 aboard Space Shuttle Challenger, he logged a total of 8 days in space. Dr. McNair flew his second mission aboard the Challenger on January 28, 1986. Just 73 seconds after launching, the world watched in horror as the space shuttle exploded in mid-air, killing all 7 astronauts. At the young age of 35, Dr. Ronald McNair left a legacy that continues to inspire a nation. Across the United States, over 24 schools, parks, and government buildings were renamed in his honor. In 1988, the McNair crater on the dark side of the moon was also named in his honor. In 1989, the Department of Education initiated the Dr. Ronald E. McNair Post-Baccalaureate Achievement Program to support disadvantaged students. In 2004, Dr. McNair was posthumously awarded the Congressional Space Medal of Honor. Dr. Ronald McNair was a brilliant man who exemplified excellence. His accomplishments demonstrated so vividly the importance of education and perseverance, and we are honored to call him a hero of color.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. White, for sharing that video with us. And now I'm wondering, could we ask you, could you talk a bit about some of the amazing women astronauts at NASA?
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Webber. Yes, wasn't that a cool video? But since March is Women History Month, I'm going to talk about several NASA women astronauts with you all. Now, because of time, I'm only going to highlight just a few of our most recent female astronauts who conduct science aboard the International Space Station. As of March 2021, 65 women have flown in space. Can you say impressive? 65 women have flown in space. The woman pictured here is NASA's astronaut, Dr. Kate Rubins. She received a bachelor's degree in biology from the University of California, San Diego, and a PhD in cancer biology from Stanford University's Medical School. Now, what's really, really cool and fascinating is that Dr. Kate Rubins has done 2 back-to-back spacewalks over the past 2 months. In February, she did a spacewalk for approximately 7 hours, and more recently, on March 5th, 2021, she did another spacewalk of approximately 7 hours as well, which now brings Kate to a total of approximately 27 hours spacewalking. The March 5th spacewalk marked her 4th in her career. Another cool fact that I love about our astronauts is that they are just like you and I. For instance, Kate enjoys running, cycling, swimming, flying, scuba diving, and reading. Now, how many of you are thinking about becoming an astronaut? So next, I'm going to share with you all 4 female astronauts that have set single spaceflight records. So the next female astronaut that I will highlight is Christina Koch. She is pictured here on the left, working inside the International Space Station. Christina set the record for women astronauts when she spent a record of 328 days aboard the International Space Station for a single space flight. Next, we have Peggy Whitson, who holds 2 records. One is for spending 289 days in space on a single space flight. The second record Peggy holds is for spending a total of 665 days in space, which is the most time spent in space by an astronaut. Can you say totally amazing? Next, we have Jessica Meir, who holds a single spaceflight record of 205 days in space and is ranked 6th on the list of NASA astronauts for single spaceflight record holders. And last but not least, we have Anne McClain, another female astronaut who ranks 7th on the NASA's astronaut single spaceflight record holder. Anne's record holding number is 204 days, which puts her directly behind Jessica. To me, these are major accomplishments for our women astronauts as a whole at NASA. Next, we're going to talk about a former NASA African-American astronaut, Dr. Mae Jemison. Dr. Mae Jemison was the first Black woman in space. How cool is that? Dr. Jemison, she was born in Decatur, Alabama, which is approximately 45 minutes from where I sit at the Marshall Space and Flight Center right here in Huntsville, Alabama. She received a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and a doctorate in medicine from Cornell University. Dr. Jemison was a life scientist aboard her 8-day mission in space, where she focused on bone cell research. Next, we're going to talk about a famous African-American who was not a scientist according to America's standard, but in my book, she's more than an astronaut. Do you all know who this is? Can you take a guess at who this lady in the picture is? Yes, you guessed it right. It's Harriet Tubman. So let's learn just a little bit more about Harriet Tubman and why she is an important figure, why Harriet Tubman is an important figure who used the constellations as a guiding tool. Remember that constellations are a group of stars. So let's explore more about Harriet Tubman and how she used the North Star. So the National Park Service shares the stories of several former slaves, including Harriet Tubman, who is widely known for her bravery acts during the 1800s, where she led slaves to freedom using the North Star. This was also known as the Underground Railroad. And as I tell you all this quick story, I want you all to think about just how free we are in America. And it was because most of our ancestors took action to help shape our independence. So as we reflect on the role and the significance of the night sky, it is critically important to note how crucial the North Star was and the role that it played in leading slaves to freedom. So during the height of the Underground Railroad movement prior to the Civil War, Harriet Tubman, who is known as the best known conductor of the Underground Railroad, moved many enslaved Americans from the South to seek freedom in the North. Traveling undercover at night offered the best chances of escaping. However, most slaves did not have maps to guide them. So without the use of a map, a slave's ability to successfully navigate to a safe house, to a railroad station, or even the woods was often a matter of life or death. And as slaves told their stories, the North Star played a key role in helping them find their way. It was a guiding light to true north and freedom. So how did they manage to find the North Star? I'm glad you asked. Escaping slaves could find it by locating the Big Dipper. And remember, the Big Dipper is a constellation, which is a well-recognized group of stars most visible in the night sky during the late winter and spring. As the name implies, its shape resembles a dipping spoon. So let's explore and locate the North Star. On the screen, you can see a constellation of stars that forms the Little Dipper. Now locate the northern star, and we can draw a line from the tip of the Big Dipper's bowl to the handle of the Little Dipper, as you can see here, shown by the white arrows in the picture. So note that the arrow is pointing towards the North Star. So now for the Starfinder activity, we're going to get ready and we're going to talk about the Starfinder activity overall. So Dr. Webber, before we jump directly into the Starfinder activity, do you have your Starfinder built?
You know, it didn't quite work out the way that I thought it should. So do you have one we could use?
Oh man, sure I do. We're going to use mine as we go through this Starfinder activity. Okay? The overall objective for the Starfinder activity is for you all to make a Starfinder that will help each one of you learn your way around the night sky by finding some of the constellations. And so a few key words for this activity are astrology, astronomy, and constellations. So what is astrology? Astrology is the study of how the position of the stars and movement of the planets affect human behavior. For example, all of us have a birthday in different months. My birthday is in February, which makes me an Aquarius. Aquarius are people who want to change the world every day. That sounds about like me. Astronomy. It is the scientific study of stars, planets, and other objects in outer space. And constellations, we've already talked about constellations, which are a group of stars that form a particular shape. So as you can see in the picture on the left, that's what our final product, it will look just like this, okay? So the next picture shows Orion the Hunter. As you can see, those are a group of stars joined just like connecting a puzzle. But remember, you have to use your imagination to connect the dots. So before we get started, all of the educators will have a video to show with their students. And so you guys are going to be able to make your own Starfinder, okay? Now, once you get your Starfinder built, that's the next cool part. The next cool part is where we're going to play the Starfinder game. So, Dr. Webber, are you ready?
I certainly am, Dr. White.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So like I said, once you get your Starfinder built, then you'll have the opportunity to play the Starfinder game with your friends, your parents, or even your siblings. But most importantly, you will learn more about constellations and how they can be helpful. So for a few minutes, Dr. Webber and I will demonstrate how to play the Starfinder game. So now that we have our Starfinder built, okay, and it should look just like mine. You can see the Starfinder right in the center. You can see the star, it forms the star. So you have to stick your thumb and your first two fingers into the pockets on the bottom of the star, just like that. Very, very cool, very, very neat. Now I'm going to ask Dr. Webber to pick a number. And the numbers that are shown here, Dr. Webber, I'm not sure if you can see them, so I'll let you know what they are. The numbers are 4, 5, 6, or 9. So Dr. Webber, will you pick a number for me?
I'm going to go for number 9, please.
Awesome. So then depending on the number on the square that the person picks, and so Dr. Webber chose number 9. Now you have to open and close the Starfinder that many times in different directions like this. So she chose the number 9. So that means I have to open and close. I'm going to go from side to side 9 different times. So watch me real quickly. Hopefully you guys can see. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, so I opened and closed the Starfinder 9 different times because that's the number that Dr. Webber chose. So Dr. Webber, if you can you pick one of the visible constellations? Can you see those constellations? I know it may be a little small. You want me to help you there? I can help you.
Scorpio. Let's go for Scorpio. I used to...
All right. So Dr. Webber chose Scorpio. There are 2, 4, 6, there are 8 letters in Scorpio, okay? So now I have to open and close my Starfinder 8 different times to spell out Scorpio, okay? All right, so now I'm going to open the Starfinder up and she's going to pick one of the visible constellations. And so, Dr. Webber, can you see those constellations inside?
I can. And I think since you just spoke about it a couple of moments ago with the amazing work of Harriet Tubman, let's go with the Big Dipper.
Awesome. So now I'm going to open up the constellations and yay, okay. So what happens now is that she chose the Big Dipper. And so you're going to open up your Starfinder. And once you open up your Starfinder, we're going to find the red. Usually the constellations are highlighted in red. And so I'm going to open it up. And what I found here inside of the Big Dipper is the Orion. I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but it's highlighted in red and it's right here and it looks like the Orion, okay? So now it's actually right there. That's the Orion and it's highlighted in red. Once you open up your Starfinder from going through, and then that's the one she picked. She picked the Big Dipper. So when we open up the Big Dipper, that's the constellation of stars that we found. That's the constellation that we found, which was the Orion. Now, what's really, really cool, we're going to open this up on a larger scale, which means we're going to explore the Google sky so we can see what this looks like I said, on a larger scale. So you will go to Google Sky, and of course, we'll have Google Sky showing across the screen. And once you get to Google Sky, you're going to click on constellations at the very, very bottom of your screen. And as you can see, there's an arrow pointing to constellations.
Questions. Our first questions are from Pioneer Academy, and Keiichi asks, how does your body feel when in space since there's so little gravity and you're floating around?
Wow, that's a great question, Dr. Webber. So the most comparable feeling is floating in water. You feel so light. You can move about with the slightest amount of effort. Dr. Webber, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think probably one of the most fun things you can do, if you can convince your parents to, is to go to Universal Studios in Florida. And they have the Hulk roller coaster. And as part of the roller coaster ride, there's a 0G roll. And that is the closest I think you'll get to feeling weightlessness on Earth, unless you're an astronaut. Or as Dr. White said, in water is pretty good approximation. The second question we have is, sounds a bit scary to me. What happens when an astronaut takes their helmet off in space?
I don't think that would be a good idea if the astronauts take their helmet off in space, as this can turn out to be really, really, really bad because the air in your lungs is forced out of your body due to the surroundings being like a vacuum. They will have like approximately 15 to 45 seconds before the oxygen in your bloodstream is just completely dry, which can be, again, extremely bad.
So not recommended.
No, not at all.
And now we have some questions from Monroe Elementary. The first one is from Adrian, and Adrian asks, since astronauts have team members who all have their own responsibilities in space, do they get nervous knowing that their team members' lives are in each other's hands? It seems like a lot of pressure. What do you think, Dr. White?
I would say yes. I'm sure they get nervous. It's just like being a part of any other team. Together, everyone achieves more. And there aren't any I's in team. But besides, the entire world is expecting nothing less than their best, right? So that must be a lot of pressure of just that alone. And they have to go through a lot of training. So there has to be a lot of pressure on the astronauts. I also like to think about this as competing like on a national championship football or basketball team. Everyone wants to win. So I think that's very, very critical that they do get nervous, and it is important because they are a team.
Very good, very good. I could totally see that. Next question we have is from Talia, and she asks, what is the best and worst part of being an astronomer?
I would think it's just not on a regular basis where an astronomer can find a star. So I think it's a little difficult being an astronomer, but I can also see that it could be very exciting when they can discover a new star. But like I said, this doesn't happen like all the time.
Very good, very good. The next one we've got is from Matteo in 5th grade, and he asks, is there sound in space? And Matteo, you know, on Earth, when we hear sound, it's because the sound is traveling to our ears by vibrating air molecules. Now, when you get into deep space, there's large empty spaces between the stars and the planets, and there's no molecules to vibrate. So there's no sound in space.
Wow.
The next question we've got, I think this one's a great one. The next one we've got is from Martha, and Martha asks, how do astronauts wash their hair in space?
So that's a great question, Martha. So when the astronauts wash their hair, they use waterless shampoo, which does not require any water for rinsing. How cool is that? However, some astronauts do use a little water, but they use the water with caution. So they're very, very careful if they use a little water. Now, the waterless shampoo is used since it has no foam, which could cause a splash inside the space shuttle. So after washing, they use dry towels to dry themselves off, and then the washing is done.
Oh, isn't that cool?
Yes, I think it's a pretty cool process.
Really cool one. Next up, we have Aaliyah, also in 5th grade. And Aaliyah asks, why is Pluto not called a planet anymore? And that's very true. When I grew up, there were 9 planets, and now there's 8. And Pluto is actually a planet. It's a dwarf planet. And what it is the reason it's considered a dwarf planet is because its size. It's a bit smaller than the other planets. And the reason that matters is because it's small enough that it lacks the gravitational forces needed to pull in and accumulate all of the material found in their orbits. I've heard this referred to as clearing your backyard. So Pluto got kicked off the main planet list for not having a cleared backyard. And I think it's just one of those things, as we find out more and more about space, about our planets, we understand them a bit more, and things change, things get reclassified. The next question we've got is from Julian, and he's in 5th grade, and it says, when stars explode, what material or substance does it create? And an exploding star is probably the most powerful force in the universe. The core of the star will collapse while the rest of it is exploding outwards. If you could imagine this happening on a very large scale, the core continues to collapse under its own gravity, and it can form one of 2 objects. Okay, it can be something called a neutron star, which is the smallest kind of star, or you guys probably know about this, it could also become a black hole. Isn't that cool? All right, the next question we have is from Yuretsi, and Yuretsi asks, does food taste different in space, and how long does it take to get to the moon?
Wow, that's that's a pretty unique question, and I do my best to answer. So of course the food tastes different in space. Astronauts have reported that the food tastes different in microgravity, and many have said that the flavors are dull, very, very dull, and that they crave for spicier and more tart foods than they would prefer here on Earth. So of course the food tastes different. Now, how long does it take to get to the moon? It takes about 3 days to get to the moon. All right, so we have some questions here from Spark Academy, and I'm going to challenge Dr. Webber to answer the questions in 1 minute. Dr. Webber, are you ready?
Oh my goodness, I guess I have to be.
All right, and let's start the countdown. What is the biggest star in our solar system?
That would be the sun. It's the only star in our solar system. Easy one. Thank you.
All right. Are the space and time the same?
Oh, yes, they are, but I don't have to explain why.
Okay, what is the telescope used for?
Oh, we use a telescope to try and see distant objects.
Awesome. What are dwarf planets?
All right, a dwarf planet is a celestial body that orbits the sun, and it has enough mass to assume a nearly to round shape, but it hasn't have enough mass to clear its own neighborhood. And it is not a moon.
Awesome. Awesome. So how many planets are in our solar system?
There's eight.
All right. What's the closest galaxy?
Well, you probably know we are the Milky Way galaxy. That's where we are right now. The closest neighbor is the Canis Major Dwarf Galaxy, 25,000 light years away from our sun, which is about 1.5 times 10 to the 17 miles.
Awesome. What's the name of our solar system?
Solar system. We revolve around the sun. There's no other name. It's just the solar system.
All right. And should our solar system have 2 stars like the others?
Oh my goodness. How many Star Wars fans out there? Do you guys remember the 2 suns of Tatooine? There are some other binary star systems and even star systems with more than 2 stars, but I don't think it would work well for us. I don't think Earth would be habitable.
Great job. I think you got it done in 1 minute. I think you did.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Dr. White. And
all right.
I think I'm going to close with the last question for you. And what does it take to become an astronaut?
So what does it take to #be an astronaut? Astronaut requirements have changed with NASA's goals and mission. So today, to be considered for an astronaut position, an applicant must meet the following qualifications. First, an applicant must be a U.S. citizen. Secondly, an applicant should have a master's degree in a STEM field, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, also including biological science, physical science, or computer science from an accredited institution. Next, an applicant should have at least 2 years of related professional experience obtained after degree completion, or at least 1,000 hours pilot in command time in jet aircraft. And last but not least, they have to be able to pass the NASA astronaut physical. So astronaut candidates, they must also have skills in leadership, teamwork, and communication. So learners, you can be working on it now, regardless of what grade you are in. And for more detailed information, all learners can visit our nasa.gov/astronauts website.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time with us today, Dr. White, and this fascinating presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Webber, for having me. It's been all my pleasure.